Let's talk about stories. Since humans have been able to communicate, we've been finding new ways to share stories with each other. While most of the time these are ways for us to share things that actually happened, humans have learned that stories that are entirely fictional can be as interesting and impactful as stories that come from real life. Sometimes even more so. Stories have been one of the main forms of entertainment for humans for almost as long as we've been on the planet, and thanks to mediums like books, TVs, and movies, humans as a collective have spent thousands of years experiencing fictional events in some form or another. And the medium which I personally think is the best at expressing stories is video games. Video games have the ability to immerse players in their worlds and experience them in a way that no other medium can. By letting the player take control of a character in the story, they're able to experience that story in a completely unique way. Whether it's by discovering the darkest secrets of Yharnam, having a fated duel with your brother over the fate of the world, climbing a perilous mountain to overcome your fears, becoming a streamer, becoming the best assassin, saving the world, destroying the world, or whatever the fuck's going on here. Video games have ways to tell stories like no other. The way that some games merge their gameplay and stories to create an atmosphere and immerse the player can be unparalleled. Like how film can use different shots and components to make different moods, games have their own unique techniques to grip players further into the story with more than just visual design. The city of Yharnam is a brutal place. The inhabitants are slowly going mad and morphing into monsters. The game not only layers this on with visual and audio design, but the game intentionally is unforgiving to new players to create a hostile feeling. You are not welcome here, and you're going to have to learn as much as you can if you want to survive. Granted, they're not without their flaws. Sometimes game stories flop and fail to engage players, or they're just too long to actually engage the people that it's aiming at. Yeah, dude, the game's great, you just need to get to level 50, 60, 65, 7, you know, just play to Heaven's Ward. But there is one genre that generally falls to the wayside when it comes to telling stories. When we talk about stories in video games, the stories in fighting games aren't generally brought up too much. Granted, you do have lore heads, and most dedicated players know the story of their games, and maybe the extended story of their favorite character, but if I looked at you and asked you to explain what the story of Street Fighter was, the likelihood is that you wouldn't actually be able to tell me. Why though? Why do these games have such a hard time telling engaging stories to players? Is it because at their core they're competitive-focused games, and competitive-focused games generally have a habit of leaving their lore outside of the game world, or only having small hints to it so it doesn't drastically impact gameplay? While some of you are probably yelling yes right now, I genuinely don't think this is the case, as fighting games have been trying to tell stories for years and generally just end up flopping on their face, which is rather upsetting. So I think we should look back at the history of fighting game stories and see what keeps causing them to fail, what they're doing right, what the future holds, and what I think might be the best fighting game story told in recent times. The majority of fighting games generally have some mode for one person to play through. Since this was the default in arcades when there wasn't another person to fight, they're generally referred to as arcade mode. Extremely original, I know. Generally, these modes have a quick introduction to the character that you're playing as, sometimes, followed by a bunch of matches against random characters, culminating in a boss fight at the end. Now, sometimes games have little scripted fights in the middle to further advance the, story, or to dedicate time to a specific rival fight, which may or may not be harder than the rest of the matches. Now, the actual power ranking of these fights can range anywhere between the easiest thing I've ever done to literally trying 20 times to beat Zangief before giving up and going to play Third Strike. I don't know what it is about this big Russian man, but Jesus, that low kick is just... oh, it gets me pissed. Now, the way that the game is supposed to work means that the rival battle is harder, so they stand out when compared to every other match. But for the life of me, I swear to God, the game just saw Goku was on the screen and decided my life should be a living hell for the next few minutes. He just kept jumping over me. I didn't know what to do. Now, unfortunately for me, my version of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike was in Japanese, so I had no idea what Makoto and Ryu were saying to each other. I'm sure they're having a lovely conversation about how they like punching people or something like that. After you beat your rival, or just a certain amount of fights, there's a chance that you'll fight a boss fight, which is essentially just a character designed to break every rule in the game in order to just piss you off and take your quarters. Yeah, dude, he can just, you know, get all of his HP back if you kill him while he still has meter. Yeah, that's fine, you know, it's fine. There's no problem with this. But after you finally beat them, you get this. Well, that was worth it. Now, every character has their own unique ending in arcade runs, and the best bit about ones like these, where technically this is a tournament, is you have no idea which one of these endings is canon until the next game comes out. Every ending is in this weird limbo state where they are both very much canon and very much did happen, and not canon at all, so you have to take them with a pinch of salt. Who killed M. Bison? Who knows? Who killed Gil? Who knows? Who's G? Who the fuck knows? I will say, if the fighting game is a spin-off of a different franchise, this method can work surprisingly well, and let you explore stories for other characters. The Melty Blood actress again current core stories can be pretty fun. The Hisui one that I played through for this video had an ending which was pretty nice. It was sweet and it was exciteful for the characters. And the actual story, whatever it was, itself was pretty fun. This is the closest I'm getting to reading Tsukihime though, fuck you. Now, once games started leaving the arcade, some anime games went down a different path to tell their stories. One which is a bit more awkwardly integrated. Now, visual novels are a specific type of anime game where the player sits there, reads a book, and occasionally makes a choice that affects the story whether they know it or not. One day, a fighting game developer looked at this medium and went, we could make a fighting game out of this. And while some developers literally did do that, some of them kind of got confused on what was going on and decided to send a bunch of the budget into making a completely different game. This is just a visual novel in my fighting game. I'm sure it's only a small section of the game. It'll take how long to recap everything? You know what? Fuck this. There's a skip function. How long does it take to skip through everything? Oh wow, there's actually fight here, huh? Well, that was easy. Yeah, if you just want some actual fights, don't play this mode, because this is what your experience is going to look like. But what if you don't want to read, and you also don't want to play the video game at all, but you still want to experience the story? Well, buddy, do I got a solution for you! Now, movies are very good at telling stories. They wouldn't have lasted this long if they weren't. There's very little input from the viewer when it comes to watching a movie, though. You can follow the plot as intensely as possible, paying attention to every little detail, or you can zone out and have a good time. Your call. However, fighting games decided that everything that makes video game stories unique and interesting was cringe and bad, and decided to put in feature-length films, or most of the time somehow cutscenes that are longer than films, into their games. Some of these are fights against easy CPUs between story beats to make sure you just haven't dozed off between scenes. But in the case of Guilty Gear Strive, it's just a fucking anime, dude! Like, what is this? It's not bad, I guess, but it's so disconnected with the events of the arcade mode and the general gameplay that I can't help but feel like it was a waste of time and energy. Like, if I wanted to watch an anime, I got so many choices. I don't want to watch an anime, though. I want to play a video game. And it would be more bearable if they were really good, but they're either only alright or... I will admit, the DLC story for Strive was much better than the main story, and it was actually a decent size, but I would still rather something that I could actually play, you know? Plus, it's not like developers haven't found ways to actually show the story of characters in fighting games, they're just not able to do these epic tales. Developers really want to tell these extremely long stories, where heroes rise to defeat evil and save the world, but fighting games can't tell that story so easily. But there are things that they are good at displaying. Fighting games have been expressing the lore of characters for years in very subtle ways. Anyone who's seen the massive influx of Ken memes on their timeline know that a character's actual design can sometimes tell you everything you need to know about them just from a glance. We've talked before about this concept, but to quickly go over it, characters and their actual design can be reflected in their gameplay. Ryu, a calm, collected fighter who fights with honor and purpose, has an extremely simple moveset, whereas Ken, a cocky, rich kid, tends to be flashier with attacks that have more stylish combos and hits. As these characters get older and things change in their lives, we're able to see this reflected in their designs, in a theory I like to call, what the fuck happened to Faust? When going between games, it's not uncommon for characters to get their designs tweaked to show things like the passage of time or drastic changes in their arcs. This can be something like growing a beard, or getting a haircut, or something very drastic, such as losing your family, or square one. Now, a lot of the time, these drastic changes cause a lot of intrigue and get people invested in the story, but with the smaller ones, observant players are able to notice little nods to different things if they've been paying attention. For example, in Street Fighter 6, not only does Ryu have a beard now, but he's also got some new drip, which is reminiscent of Oro, his last master to canonically train him. But it's also reminiscent of his old master, Goken, who originally trained him, as they both wear similar garments. Along with the fact that he has new moves unique to him, and he's dressing like how his masters did, we can not only track the lineage of where he got his skills from, but also see that he has developed as a fighter, as he's now dressing like people who kick ass for a living. If you don't know about these characters, then it's just a cool new design for Ryu, but if you know, it's nice parallels that you can point out. There's other ways that fighting games are able to display more stuff. For example, there's a common trend in fighting games where some characters have specific intros depending on who they're fighting. This can be something simple like a new voice line interaction between the two characters, something more elaborate like a custom animation at the start of the match, or something a bit more cinematic.
Please protect the plants, the animals. Protect this world I love.
You've prattled on long enough, you miserable failure. He's changing.
Holy shit, I fucking love Dragon Ball. Cinematics like this are sometimes rare, but once you see them, you know that this fight means something. The best bit is actually when they show up at the end of the fights. Keeping on the Dragon Ball FighterZ example, depending on which characters are playing on what map, there's a chance that you'll activate a dramatic finish. Most of these are recreations of scenes from the show, with a few of them being just fan service, but they're just so cool. They're basically the instant kills from Guilty Gear Xrd, right? But they recreate scenes from the show that people love. There's always great cap-offs to hype sets, and getting one in an actual match feels like a rite of passage for any Dragon Ball player. Sometimes people pick characters just to main them so they can get a dramatic finish. There's one more element that fighting games have used for years to help tell a story, and that is, of course, music. Music is an essential part of any fighting game, as it not only has the job of carrying the fight for the entirety of the match, but it also needs to be good so players don't turn the music off. The way fighting games use music is pretty unique from any genre, and the games have a lot of fun tricks up their sleeve when it comes to telling stories. You have your general music theory stuff, which I definitely know a lot about, but the games are able to use specific tracks to create atmosphere depending on what happens. The most common of which is a versus theme. Some games have specific songs that play if two characters are fighting each other. This is most common in BlazBlue, where there's like as many versus tracks as there are characters, honestly. And of course, how could I ignore the songs with lyrics? Sometimes fighting game songs have lyrics attached to them for special character themes in order to make them stand out and show they're important. In Guilty Gear Xrd, when Soul activates Dragon installed, the game literally screams. Along with a crazy animation, this shows that shit is about to go down whether you're ready or not. It also shows how he's suppressing this form from people who don't know his story. Of course, all of this is turned up to 11 in Strive, where each character gets their own song that they can play in versus mode that literally sings their stories and motivations at you. I heard someone who was pretty cool and good at video games made a video on that you might have seen. I don't know, dude. It's kind of hot. You should go and watch his video again. This can add context to characters that can't be explored in their gameplay or other modes, or enhance things that are already there. And personally, I think Strive actually has the strongest version of a story told through elements unique to fighting games that we've ever seen. But first, I've got to eat my own words.
The town inside me.
About 2 months ago, I made a video discussing the characters I wanted in the second season of Guilty Gear Strive. At about 6:13, I say this line. For your favorites that I didn't mention, I either simply do not care or no. I do not know what I did to piss off Daisuke, but I'm glad he's having so much fun fucking with me. Bridget is the first character of Strive Season 2. They have very long-reaching buttons and is one of the only characters to have consistent Okizeme setups. Despite that, their play rate is pretty low compared to most characters, which I don't personally understand. It seems that they're everywhere on my timeline. Do I like playing Bridget? No, I don't. But there is something I have to admit. Strive Bridget is a very well-written character. If we're going to look back at Bridget's old lore from the XX games, we can find out that it doesn't matter that much. Bridget for the longest time was just a character that attracted a very weird group from the Guilty Gear community due to her design. Combine that with the tactic of just running the fuck away for the entire match, and I feel as though my disdain for the character was kind of justified. Going into Strive though, Arxis obviously looked at the character and thought, we can do better than this, and actually put some effort into the story for her. Bridget has the only arcade mode so far in which you don't fight Nagoriyuki as the final boss. In fact, the final boss is actually Kai. Now, if you get a flawless run, you actually fight Kai with his dragon install state unlocked. However, since I don't play this character, I don't have footage of that, and the Heartless run is actually more direct about the meaning of the full story anyway.
For my future self. But what if I make the wrong decision?
You got your whole life ahead of you, kid. Gotta learn to take a hit sometime.
And there are helping hands right in front of you.
I don't want to run scared anymore. If I keep on faking it like this, I know I'll regret it. So from now on, no matter what, no more lying to myself. Thank you, both of you.
Don't mention it. Happy trails, cowgirl, or, cowboy.
Cowgirl is fine, because I'm a girl.
Not only in the story is character development given to Bridget, but she also gives some to Gold Lewis, a character who I personally believe needed some desperately, as well as strengthening Kai's character in the process by showing the faith he has in his morals and the path that he's on, something that is also brought up in his theme, might I add. Not to mention, this just makes sense logically. Once she left her home, she was free to do whatever she wanted. So why did she think presenting as a girl was still the best idea? Well, that's because deep down, she always was one. Her theme adds more context to this as well. By the time that we get to Strive, Bridget is a world-class bounty hunter, but she feels incomplete with her place in the world. She gets so desperately close to figuring out what is wrong with her, yet she's never able to quite grasp the problem, always blaming it on smaller things that are quite inconsequential.
I've been patient, but it was bearable. I've had the gray haze for a long time, though. I never found out what it was. I
hate the alarm clock I chose.
Until eventually it finally clicks at the end of the song, right before the last chorus. She triumphantly accepts herself for who she is and is able to live happily because of it. Since she's accepted herself and gained independence, she's able to choose what's best for her and carve her own path as the best version of herself. Bridget's story of growth is really good. It's the best way that I've seen an arcade mode in Strive used for a character. In fact, it's the best way that I've seen arcade modes used for any character. It works so well because the story is relatively small and simple. It's Bridget coming to terms with who she really is, with the assistance of her comrades. It's short, it's sweet, it's impactful, and it's a great moment for the fans of the character who get to see her grow as a person. It's a combination of techniques that fighting games are great at to display a story. Granted, it is missing some elements like special intros or other things, but they're unfortunately missing it altogether in Strive. Though I will say the unique voice lines between her, Gold Lewis, and Kai, they do help quite a bit.
You got your whole life ahead of you, kid. Gotta learn to take a hit sometime.
And there are helping hands right in front of you.
While I want to say the future for fighting game stories looks bright, unfortunately, I don't actually think that's the case. Capcom, while definitely taking interesting strides with the genre, seems like they're going to split the story and gameplay apart a bit more with the new open world mode they're working on. It does look fun, letting you fight different people in the world, but there's a chance the story and actual fighting mode still have basically nothing to do with each other. Tekken 8 is definitely a new Tekken game, and if its story is anything like Tekken 7, I'm not holding out for much, honestly. The big problem is, when developers want to make big, overarching stories, the actual gameplay of fighting games can be pretty limiting, as you're generally stuck with a few characters who all have a limited amount of moves they can do, limited movement, and system mechanics they have to adhere to. Most fighting games are designed to be a competitive experience first and foremost, so having a way for a story to be told in there is either an afterthought, or something that developers have to do in a completely different medium. It's obviously not easy to do, and I'm hoping that Street Fighter 6 finds a solution to this problem, but taking what fighting games are good at and enhancing them can only add to the player experiences. The games want to appeal to different people, and if you're making them competitive games, having things like unique intros, dramatic finishes, unique songs that can play, and so on, add to those experiences and keep players playing for longer. I hope that developers keep finding more ways to add story elements into their games, because they always enhance the gameplay experience and make certain fights feel more special. I am also a massive nerd and love them. Thank you all for watching. This is the last week of September over on Twitch. If you want to see me make a fool of myself, come on over there. Have a good night, everyone, and trans rights are human rights.
Special thanks to Super, Brudikai, Lady Dantalon, Monarch, Mystery, Procticon, Daniel Wiederick, Rabbit Mask, Tom Tanks, Edison Lottery, Smeech, Straw Fox, Otaku Joseph, and Maki Yamazaki for being Tier 2 patrons. Also very special thanks to E Possum and Kipo Beepo for helping me write the script.